In this video, I'm going to break down some of the points that Max Maxwell is making regarding PropStream and their MLS data, as well as the impact that it'll have on BatchLeads. Hey guys, it's Ivo with Batch. I am one of the co-founders. So I saw one of the videos that Max Maxwell did regarding PropStream, the MLS data, the recent changes that PropStream has implemented. I'm not going to comment too much on what PropStream is doing, how they're doing it, or the data vendors that they use. I just want to clarify some of the information that we do have in our own databases in our platform. So I'm just going to walk through some of the video and just elaborate on some of the points that Max is making.
PropStream sent out an email and said, hey guys, we will no longer be able to give you sold MLS records. Now, for some of us, this means nothing, and for a little amount of us, this means something, and I'm going to explain that to you. Today, we're going to talk about disclosure states and non-disclosure states and what those are. So before we move on with the video to explain what all of this means, let's talk about what a
That's a good point that Max is making. There are disclosure and non-disclosure states. There's 12 non-disclosure states that I think he goes over the video. I'm not going to go over them myself. But in the email that PropStream sent, and I've seen the email as well, I don't believe that they were mentioning anything as far as disclosure or non-disclosure states. My understanding is that they're supposedly losing the information that they did have nationwide. And obviously the email states that a lot of other vendors and nationwide data providers are going to lose that access as well. Again, I can't comment on what PropStream is doing, the data vendors that they have and are going to have. I can only comment on the information that we have in our platform and the data vendors that we get our information from. There are a handful of providers nationwide that provide MLS data. It's not a secret which those vendors are. You guys can look them up online. From the get-go, BatchLeads has taken a different approach of how we display assessor data, which is again what the county records, what the county records that you guys get in public information data, and the way we display MLS data. We do get active, pending, sold information on a lot of the data on a lot of the states nationwide. There are those 12 non-disclosure states that neither us nor PropStream, nor any other data vendors out there that can legally get the public sold price of these properties. And Max gets actually into a really good point later on in the video, which I'm going to cover as far as the non-disclosure versus the disclosure states.
Let's talk about what a non-disclosure state. In America, there are 12 non-disclosure states. I'm going to read them to you. Alaska, Idaho, Kansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, some of Missouri, Montana, New Mexico, which is a strict non-disclosure state, North Dakota, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. Right. Now, some influencers on Instagram and all over the place have been saying, oh my God, PropStream is going problem. Now let's talk about this, and let's talk about using this fear tactic for marketing. It's not real. And you guys know I do own 2 data companies. I'm quite a data nerd. So I dive deep into the data. The reality is most of these companies get the data from the same place. They have to register a website that they're allowed to publish the data. And frankly, most of them don't publish the data in the right place that they say they're going to do, so they're in violation of the terms. Matter of fact, our company was going to look into getting this data and publishing, but we can't use it in these third-party apps that we would offer you guys, so it makes no sense. So we use other sources in order to give you this data. But let's get to the nuts and bolts. Right now, PropStream says in non-disclosure states, they're no longer going to be able to give you the sold data, which is useful information when you are running comps. And there's other companies like Batch that says they still have access.
Good point Max is making here. However, based on the PropStream email, I actually don't see anywhere in the email that it says that PropStream is no longer offering MLS sold data in the non-disclosure states. The email, according to my understanding, states that PropStream is losing access to all states, all sold data in all of the states nationwide. So back to the video.
That says they still have access, or not Batch themselves, but some people online said that they have access to this MLS data. So I have access to both platforms. I've been using PropStream for a long time, and I dibble and dabble into Batch to see if the records kind of match.
Great point Max is making here. Again, I'm not going to comment on the information that PropStream has and how they display it, because again, I don't know some of the vendors that they might be using, or how they're aggregating this information, or maybe it's there's some legal reasons to not displaying some of this data. The way we created this data in BatchLeads from the very beginning was that we took a very aggregative approach, meaning that we take data from a variety of sources. We could have 3, 4, 5, 10 different sources of data, and in some situations for some data points we do have over 7 or 8 different data providers. And what we do is we aggregate the data. So the end goal for us is to be able to create a single file and a single source of truth for a lot of this data. So again, we have nationwide, and then when I say nationwide, there are a few MLS providers that do not have it. It's a handful of MLS providers that do not provide any data to any national vendor. However, we do have about a 99% coverage in the whole country. We have active, contingent, pending, and sold MLS data. Now, the sold portion is what obviously PropStream is taking off. When a property sells, what typically happens? The MLS, a property theoretically goes from a pending state to a sold state. As soon as that sold status occurs, we pick up that record and we enhance our data record, data file with the sold status on that MLS. Again, we are aggregating this data from a lot of county records, MLS records, so we can create a single individual file and be able to display this to our users.
My computer, and we picked in a non-disclosure state, Texas, which I know a lot of you guys are. We picked a property to comp. We comped a property called 3411 Latimer Street. It's a 4-bedroom, 1-bath. And when you pull this up on Batch, it gives you all the comps here to the bottom. Now, if you look at the comps, it's going to give you price per square foot, lot size, year built, doesn't have a pool, and the price. Now, when you're running comps, this price in this column is typically sold. At least that's what you think it is. At least that's what they say it is. Now, PropStream had access to this data, and they no longer have access to these sold comps in these 12 states. I don't know why, but the MLS literally said, you can't use this data anymore the way that you're using it. Okay, fine, so they pivot. So if we look at this property here, and I clicked on one of the comps, which is Southland, it's 2538 Southland in Dallas, Texas. Let's look here. The sale date is 3/9/2021. Sold price for $179 at 157 a square foot. Talks about the list price. Now let's be clear. So it's not all the MLS data you cannot display in a non-disclosure state. It specifically says you cannot talk about the sold price. That is the main thing. You cannot publicly display the sold price in a non-disclosure state, period, unless the owner themselves wants to disclose this information, or you're working with a realtor and they give you this information in order to make a better decision when you are buying your own property. So let's go into this. So I've pulled up the Southland here, and let's look at it. It says that it sold for $179. Now, Batch says that this is MLS data for $179, and you can see that over here. If you look at 2538 Southland, you go across, it says 179,100, right? So now I'm going to switch over to this same property on PropStream. It has the pictures, right? And it's saying that the last prior sale price is $179. But the big difference between what they're saying and what Batch is saying, PropStream and Batch, I'm just giving you an exact replica of the same property. It's saying $179,100. They have the same exact numbers. Now, PropStream just said they no longer can give you the sold data, so this is what they call an estimate. So 179.1 is an estimate. Let's talk about how most of these companies actually get this information to not really a science, but down to a guesstimate or estimate in these properties, in these non-disclosure states. They take what they call the mortgage amount. They take the mortgage amount, and if it's a FHA loan, so they find out how much the mortgage is, then they find out what type of mortgage it is, and if it's a FHA, they're gonna take away 2.5, 3.5, whatever it is, and they're gonna say that's the amount of that the property sold for. Sometimes this can be off between $10,000, $20,000, just depending on the price of the house. So if two companies, one is saying that they don't have MLS data, which is, they don't have the MLS sold comps, which is PropStream, and they come up with 179.1. And then we also go over to the batch comp, and it's saying the same exact thing. So what I did was I pulled a...
So Max is right actually on this point. In the non-disclosure states, the price has always been, and historically, it's always been an estimated value of that property. Again, that's specifically talking about the 12 different states that are non-disclosure states. The price gets estimated based on the loan type, the interest rate, which is all public information. Again, loan type, interest rate, you can triangulate the active and pending MLS price to be able to come up with an estimated value. And again, Max is right in this video where in the non-disclosure states, the price is estimated. Again, there's not a single nationwide vendor or nationwide provider that can legally display a lot of this information, because again, it's not a matter of, this information not a matter of public record.
So what I did was I pulled a random property in Texas, looked at the comps, and I looked at 8 of them, and I'm going to show you guys 3 of them. Let's go to 26, 23 estimated sold price, because it is completely illegal to show the sold data in disclosure states. Now, PropStream has been around since I think the late 90s, early 2000s, and developed large relationships and probably has gathered more data than any probably real estate aggregator that is open for investors. But the information is right here. It is clearly an estimate. And if we go over here to batch, it is 12.5. I don't see that it says estimate, but if you know it's an estimate. Like I said, most of these companies all get to publish this data from one place, but most of them are publishing it on third-party apps that they're not allowed to publish on it. Anyways, so the reality is, if you live in a non-disclosure state, hear me out, you're gonna have to do some digging. It is what it is. You've always had to do some digging. If you use PropStream, you had the advantage where you can get the MLS sold data in the last while, but now you can't get it. Their suppliers has said, listen, you no longer have access to the sold data, which is fine. And everybody else, every other software uses this method to take the mortgage amount, figure out what type of loan it was, estimate the amount of deposit, or the amount of down payment that they gave, and then give the actual what they think is an estimate. So PropStream says it's an estimate. Batch doesn't say it's an estimate. They both come up with the same number. Basically, what I want to do is, I pride myself in not using fair tactics for marketing, because it's just not the way you should do it. And so the reality is, in a non-disclosure state, neither one of these companies have access to the MLS sold data.
Max makes a good point here. Again, to the point that I've mentioned already, the non-disclosure states, the sale price is an estimated value. It's not displayed anywhere. In the other 38 states that are the disclosure states, we do have MLS data that comes directly from MLS providers. Again, we aggregate active, pending, contingency statuses, and then when the property gets sold, we populate those sold prices, which are a matter of public record, into our database. So again, we are able to triangulate a property from going from active to contingent to pending to a sold status, and we know everything about the property. Going back to the email though that PropStream said, I don't believe that they are specifically talking about a non-disclosure versus the disclosure state. Again, the email, the way I read it, states that they are, for whatever reasons, I'm not going to comment on it, I have my opinions on it, but for whatever reasons, they are not displaying MLS sold data nationwide. Going a step further, in the email it states that they're not displaying expired listings, either failed listings or expired listings. The way we've handled, expired listings, failed listings, all it is it's a property that was listed on the MLS that for whatever reason stopped being on the MLS and did not sell on that MLS transaction. So we've been able to, again, from the very beginning, to be able to triangulate and come up with our own logic of what constitutes an expired listings. If you go into an MLS and you click on an expired listings, you may get properties for 10 years, properties that were listed 10 years ago that are considered expired listings. In our platform, properties are considered expired listings for X amount of time, whether that's 2 years, 3 years. That's just logic that we can alternate and change as needed. But we do have expired listings in our platform today. Finishing off my thoughts on Max, I think Max covers some of the information fairly well. The non-disclosure versus the disclosure. Again, the non-disclosure is an estimated value of what the property is sold for. There is not a provider out there that can provide you that information. To finish off the video, just wanted to summarize some of the information that we do have, again, in BatchLeads. I'm not going to comment too much on the PropStream situation. Based on the email, the way I read it, they're not displaying any more sold data nationwide, so it hampers your ability to do comps the way you used to be able to do comps. I will be able to only comment on the information that we have, how we have it, and how we aggregate it. When a property goes inactive, we have that information. When the property goes to contingent or pending status, we have that information. And when the property sells, we have that information, except for the properties that are in non-disclosure states, and there's 12 of them. That sale price is an estimated value. This is how, from the get-go, we've been able to triangulate, through our own logic and aggregation, a single set of records, a single database. So, for instance, when you're doing comparables, you are doing comparables based on all of the available data. You can obviously filter based on active, pending, or sold statuses. And you are able to continue to do business and to continue to do comparables and look up property information the same way that you have been able to the past year and a half, 2 years. I've checked with multiple data providers as far as any nationwide MLS changes, MLS data aggregated changes. There haven't been any. And again, this is coming from several or multiple of our vendors that have access to the nationwide MLS data. To Max's point, we're not in the business of using any fear tactics. The only thing that I can say is that affiliates have reached out to us saying, hey, PropStream said that you're no longer going to have MLS data. To that point, my answer is firm in saying that everything that we've had and that we have today is not going to change for the foreseeable future. Again, 2-3 years down the line, things can always change. As of today, though, nothing has changed. The way we've always aggregated property data will remain the same, and people and all of our users will be able to continue to do comparables and look at property information the same way they have been the past several years. As a final point, the information that we have today is not going to change. You're still going to be able to very conveniently do comparables, look up property information nationwide, view all of the pictures for those properties, and again, nothing is changing from the way we aggregate or display data, whether that's MLS, Assessor, or any other data sources. If you guys want to stay up to date with what's happening in the real estate industry, make sure you tune into BatchTV.